Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Parenting Tools podcast with me, Jordan.
And me, Jason. This is the podcast where two parenting tools talk about life and children and sleep depravity.
We've got a good episode today because this is our very first expert episode with sleep consultant Daisy Ferns.
I literally just got goosebumps there. I think that's probably because I'm really tired. But it was also very touching and moving. If you do listen to the podcast and you enjoy it, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the podcast. It really helps I don't even know the reach of the podcast.
The extension.
We just really want to get as much help as possible to as many parents as possible. And your reviews and your shares and your likes really do help.
Sweet, I'm so tired. Sweet, I'm so tired. You treat me this way.
So, George, how's your week been?
Do you know what? I've had a lovely week. Saw you on Friday. We had a little shindig, didn't we?
I forgot about that.
So, special guest Dan, if you cast your mind back to episode 5.
Special guest Dan.
Back with the jingles. Dan turned 30. Happy birthday, Dan.
Happy 30th birthday.
So we had a little party, and do you know what was lovely about it? It was lots of parents.
What I loved about that part is that there were parents and non-parents, and you could tell because the parents huddled together,
sat down,
and you could tell the conversation in the room went from things about life and culture. Then suddenly, as soon as you cross a threshold, all you can hear about is kid talk.
Yeah, I loved it. I love talking about our kids with other parents that I haven't seen for a while and only see a few times a year. So yeah, that was great. I had a lovely time. What about you? What you got going on?
Not a lot of sleep this week. Not a lot of sleep at all.
Well, you have come to the right place, my friend.
And if you are struggling with sleep because of your child, you too have come to the right podcast.
So this week on the podcast, we have sleep. Are we settling on wizard?
Connoisseur.
Sleep chef. We have Daisy Ferns of Lavender Blue Consulting with us, and she's going to talk through all things getting better sleep with your children.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
And I genuinely have come away with some tips.
I can't wait to try them.
And I'm looking forward to 8 hours of sleep a night, baby.
So we put a clip on TikTok, I want to say last week, about how sleep deprivation and going to work is hard.
Yeah.
And we had some comments from people.
Yeah, I remember this.
So we had one comment saying, I'm a doctor and I'm genuinely concerned I'm going to kill someone.
Oh, wow.
Because I am sleep deprived.
Wow.
That's some pressure, isn't it?
That's like doctors have it hard enough without kids.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm afraid I'm going to kill someone. No joke.
Like purposely?
She said 24-hour shifts after a bad night.
Wow.
I need all the shout-outs, lads.
All the shout-outs your way.
Yeah,
I could not do that.
You can have them. We had another one from a paramedic saying being a paramedic on call for 24-hour shifts is the only thing that prepared me for being a parent. Wow. Someone else put, it's just fog behind the fog. So much fog. And then we had another one, same person, different comment, saying that they are a dad of twins. And they said, struggling to write an email, I completely understand being a college student having to write papers as a twin father.
Wow.
There's two different extremes there, isn't there? There's like academia and not killing someone.
Yeah.
And the struggle is real for both. Someone's put, I've been through it, I'm going through it, work suffered, my mental health suffered, but yet I love my daughter unconditionally. It's so weird.
It is. They feel like they're opposing forces.
Yeah.
But they just get you, don't they, kids?
Yeah. Yeah, you feel so good about them,
yeah,
but so bad about yourself.
But what they do, it's like a really bad relationship, isn't it? You just keep going back, even though you know they're terrible for you.
Yeah. So yeah, that was funny. And the last one's not funny at all. But it says, I remember sitting at work and crying because all I wanted was to die so I could sleep.
Wow. Legitimately though, like I know somewhat of what that feels like.
They've put, I swear that was the feeling.
And like I've spoken to so many parents as well that have had that exact sort of train of thought. And like legitimately, that's why we looked at sleep training. We've looked at all the options of how to get more sleep, because it puts you in such a dark place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And like you can't see the end when you're in it. You think that's life now.
Yeah.
And you actually can't see that at some point this gets better.
But it does.
It does. And
hopefully we can help.
Hopefully Daisy can help. Before we introduce our guest, I just want to tell you this, Jordan. So this week I took Noah to soft play.
Yep.
And my daughter's quite small for her age, or she's petite. She's not small for her age, she's just petite. She run around the soft play, but she's very confident. And so there's kids that are bigger than her, and the first altercation is she pushed the kid off the little twizzly spinning thing. And I was like, you can't push people off. You've got to share. Okay, we've gone through that. But the thing that made me laugh so much is that this other kid was just like following around. And he was like, do you want to be my friend?
Oh.
So cute.
Aren't kids the best, man?
They are the best. But my daughter turned around and went, no. And just walked off.
What was his reaction?
It's like, oh. And I could hear him asking another kid like 5 minutes later.
I like that they've sounded out Noah's name there. No. Oh. Put in the no in Noah. At least she was honest.
I mean, like 5 minutes later, she had found someone else to be her friend.
Someone else?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a kick in the teeth.
She was brutal.
I don't want to be your friend, but that doesn't mean I don't want a friend.
Amazing. Should we get our guest on?
Yeah, one thing to mention, if you are, by some means, a business owner and you look after staff members, Daisy posted, before we speak to her, she posted on that video that businesses have got her in to help out with staff members that are struggling with the whole sleep deprivation thing.
It's a great idea.
So it's some tips for getting their kids to sleep, but also how to cope with the sleep deprivation. So listen to this conversation, and if you are wanting to get Daisy in, you can follow her at Lavender Blue Sleep Consulting on Instagram, or just search Daisy Ferns Sleep Consulting on Google.
Amazing. Let's go.
Welcome to the podcast, Daisy Ferns. Daisy, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. One thing, Daisy, we want to clarify before we jump into the questions.
Yeah.
What job title do you give yourself? Because we've speculated from sleep coach to sleep wizard to sleep savant. What is it?
So I call myself a sleep consultant or sleep coach or sleep trainer, but I have been called in the past a sleep fairy godmother. Yeah, sleep wizard, that's definitely a good one. Sleep miracle worker, that's another one as well. But any of those is fine. Sleep consultant, right?
And Daisy, one thing we always ask our guests is about your own setup at home. So who are you and what have you got?
Yeah, okay, so my name's Daisy and my company is Lavender Blue Sleep Consulting, and then we live in Derby, which is quite close to you, Jordan, not far at all. So there's me and my husband Paul, and then we've got 2 children, Felicity or Flissy, who's 6.5, and then we've got Jack, who's 2.5.
Wow, 2 kids.
Yep, all good fun.
How did you find yourself becoming a sleep connoisseur?
Connoisseur, I like it. I had that one in as well. Yeah, I'll add that to my email signature, I think. So my daughter never slept. She got to the point where she was 4.5 years old. She had started school and she still wasn't sleeping through. And we'd gone through every technique that we could think of. We've gone through every reason that we could think of why she wasn't sleeping. Everybody would say, oh, she'll be fine. She'll sleep through when she starts weaning, or she'll sleep through when she starts walking, or when she starts nursery. And kind of the top level one for us that we were really pinning all our hopes on was her starting school. And she did actually sleep through either first, second week of starting school. She did actually sleep through. And we thought, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. And then she was back to not sleeping again. So I think it just absolutely exhausted her that first or second week. And then she'd realised, no, this is it now. We'll carry on as normal. So we were just, honestly, we were at rock bottom, having had 5+ wake ups a night for 4.5 years. And I'm sure as parents yourself, you know what it's like, don't you, when they're waking up all through the night. So we hired someone to help us. And at first, we were quite skeptical, I think, as are a lot of people, because this person doesn't know you or your situation. It costs money. And so we put it off. And one night, in the middle of the night, I just decided I was going to book this call and find out more about how she could help us. And it's going to sound really cliched, but it was life-changing for us. And it took about 2 weeks. Night 13 was the first time she slept through. And then it took about 6 weeks for her to do it more consistently. And at this point, like I said, honestly, it just changed our lives so much. And I said to my husband, and I said to this lady that we were working with, I have to do this. I need to do this, because there's so many people out there in a similar situation that don't even realise that you can get help and you can turn things around. So I was working at the University of Nottingham at the time. And then I think I'd just started my maternity leave with my son. So I'm going to say I had a bit of time available, but the time that you have available when you've got a newborn baby. So I started doing my training, and then my son was my first client, if you like. So he was 4 months old when I started sleep training him. Wow. So that was 2 years ago.
That's mad. And I know you said, like, you don't know how many people would realise it's life-changing. Like, I know we have a lot of questions from our listeners, and I'm trying not to hog the time for myself. Because we have a 2.5-year-old who is still waking up in the middle of the night, and we have done like so many different courses and so many different methods. But we always result just ending up having her in our bed. It's the only way that we'll get sleep. And it's like, when we have a good night's sleep, it genuinely is like the world of difference. So I can imagine, especially for some of our listeners as well, like, you don't realize how bad it is when you've got used to it. Then when you get back to normal life, and when they're supposed to sleep all the way through, it's like being a different person. So I will try not to ask questions, but I will ask some.
That's absolutely fine. But you know what, though? If you're all getting sleep when she's in the bed with you, it's like, just do it, because there's no right. There doesn't have to be a right or wrong, does it? It's when you're not getting sleep.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It starts off.
What did you say?
The first few times we bring her in, she does sleep, and now she just spends all night kicking me in the head.
That's the trouble. Yeah, that's the trouble.
So Daisy, we put on our Instagram that you were coming on, and we asked people for their questions. And we've got quite a few questions that you'd expect to hear from parents around getting children to sleep, keeping them asleep through the night, and then getting them to sleep through till morning. We also had a few questions about naps. So that's the kind of the categories we're gonna talk about, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course it is. No problem.
So the first question we've got comes from Sean, and I actually really enjoyed this question. It says, what are good activities or things to do pre-bed to help wind your children down to get them ready?
Well, that's a really good question. And it's one of these things that you can do from the minute they're born. You can do a bedtime routine. You don't have to wait until they're a certain age, because if you do the same things in the same order, roughly, every night, it helps them to understand what's coming next. It helps them to predict. And even from as young as a couple of weeks old, they can then start to view these things as sleep cues. So you might have heard previously about the whole bath, bottle, bed routine. So give them a bath. And baths are actually a really good activity to do, because a warm bath can lower the body temperature, which is what happens as your body prepares for sleep. So your body's almost mimicking what happens at sleep time. So bath's a good idea. You absolutely don't have to do that though if you bath your children in the morning or lunchtime or whatever, but the bath's a nice idea. There's also reading a story, or just looking at books, especially with the little ones that like to bash the books about and rip them and bite them. Just looking at a book together is a nice activity. Anything really that is calming. So it could be, if you've got a slightly old one, it could be jigsaws or playing dolls. So my daughter now, she'll sit and play with a Barbie house for half an hour before she goes to bed. And it is one of those that like lights and sounds and things. So we're like, no, we're not having that on at bedtime, because that's a bit crazy. But yeah, she'll sit and play with the dolls. You could listen to some lullabies together or sing some songs together. Baby massages are also a really nice, relaxing activity to do together. It doesn't really matter what you do. as long as it's not too stimulating for them. So one of the things I would recommend you don't do is look at screens. So that's not just your kind of TV type screen, but you've also got things like phones nowadays. You might be FaceTiming grandma just before bed, which you don't, I mean, maybe you do think that, but I wouldn't think of that as actually or looking at a screen, because it's just what we do day to day, isn't it? I only think of like putting TV on, but anything that is a screen is best to avoid before bed. And that's adults too. And I know that I don't follow my own advice with that. But screens, they give off something called blue light. And it's not just screens that give off blue light. Daylight is a type of blue light. So it's not just about the blue light. But blue light stops the production of our sleep hormone. So it's actually going to make it harder for your child to get to sleep if they've been exposed to this blue light. And that's why sometimes it's harder for them to sleep when it's light in the evenings as well. But if you also think about some of the kids' programs, I'm going to say In the Night Garden is one of the worst ones for lights, sounds, colours, but who on earth knows what is happening in that program? So if we've got to concentrate to find out what's going on, no matter what on earth is going to be going on in your child's brain to like, try and work out what is happening in this program. So in actual fact, anything as long as it's relaxing, and I'd try and do the same things in the same order every night. Hopefully that's answered your question, Sean.
That's great tips. And
Thank you.
before I jump into the next question, when it comes to like sleep training and all of that, I know there's like a sliding scale of on one extreme end being, I don't know how to put it, like really gentle, and like on the other end, less gentle.
Let them cry.
Yeah, like it might be helpful. Can you just explain a little bit about that just for listeners and kind of what's the way you would usually find yourself sitting on that scale?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, because some people just hear sleep training and you think, right, it means shutting your child in a room to cry. And it absolutely does not have to mean that. And I would never advocate that anybody does that. I mean, no judgment if you do, but that wouldn't be something that I would recommend you do. So you've got this kind of, on one side, you've got like what I would call attachment parenting, which might be co-sleeping, extended breastfeeding, baby wearing, being totally led by your baby, which I think a lot of people nowadays are quite drawn towards. And then on the other end of the scale, you've got that whole cry it out, as in you put them in their room at bedtime and you leave them to cry until morning, and at some point they will just pass out. And they're very opposite extremes. And if you Google sleep training and you look hard enough, you'll find studies done decades ago in orphanages in Romania that talk about how children were left alone to cry. And they got to the point where they didn't even bother crying at all anymore, even in the day. They didn't bother communicating because they knew that nobody would come. And that's really, really sad to think about. But what I really don't like is now people bring that up as a reason not to do sleep training. And in the middle, you've got a whole sliding scale. So you can do very, very gentle approaches where you maybe start by, instead of, let's say, feeding your child to sleep, you then decide you're going to rock them to sleep for a while. And then you're going to stop the rocking and you're just going to hold them to sleep. So you're making that really small baby steps towards giving them that independent sleep skill, which is important for them to be able to sleep through the night. But then you have also got we're nowhere near the kind of cry it out scale, but you've got the idea that you might just give them a little bit of space to settle, because some children and most adults would not enjoy somebody sat right next to them, patting them until they fell asleep, because it's too much for them. It's too much stimulation. There's too much going on. So actually just giving them a couple of minutes, and I'd say to people, start with 3 minutes, because that feels like it's long enough when you're in the moment if they are upset, but it's not so long that you feel like you're going to do any sort of damage to them. And actually, if you were in the shower or something and you thought they were asleep and you didn't hear them crying, you'd be 3 minutes, wouldn't you, by the time you got to them? So giving them just that little bit of space to settle, and you can increase that if you feel that they're okay. But that is better for some children who find that constant attention and constant support too stimulating. And then you've got kind of all the in between of there as well. Oh no,
that's brilliant.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think, like, for us and our experience, my daughter, in the beginning, like, baby led worked fine and she was sleeping low. Perfect. The moment that she stopped sleeping well, We frantically looked everywhere. And then we actually stumbled upon some of those reports, and that was one of the things that particularly my wife kind of was like, we can't just let her cry out. And so we found a sleep training thing, and it was mainly routine, and it worked fantastic for a while. But there's still definitely, and as they get older, they like to rebel a little bit more, especially my daughter. She loves to rebel. Have you got any?
Don't they all at that age?
Have you got any like tips or techniques in like particularly handling how to deal with that when they cry when you leave them?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because we're programmed to want to respond to our children when they cry. And I'm absolutely not saying don't respond to them if they're crying, but it's thinking about why they're crying. Is it because they're tired? Is it because they're frustrated because they can't get to sleep? Is it because they're cross at you because you're not doing what they want you to do, even if you might not even know what that thing is? Or is it because they're in some sort of genuine need of something? And if it's the former, actually leaving them for a few minutes and having that mindset of they're fine, they just need sleep here, is very different to the latter, which is they actually need something here, whether that's hunger or a nappy change or they're in some sort of pain or discomfort. So I haven't got tips as such for dealing with it, but having it clear in your mind, that kind of wants versus needs sort of cry, is really quite important when you're embarking on something like this, because all babies cry. It's their way of communicating. So actually, when some people say these no cry sleep training programs, I don't believe it, because they're going to communicate with you to tell you that I don't like the way you're doing this. I want you to get me in your bed, or do you know what I mean? Or that I'm frustrated. I need you to help me get to sleep here. And the only way they're going to do that is to cry. And failing all of that, when you've dealt with whatever is happening, have a nice glass of wine or a bar of chocolate and reward yourself for getting through it. That's my other tip.
Celebrate the little wins.
Celebrate, absolutely, yeah. But no, in all seriousness, though, I think having that mindset of they are okay, they're just crying because they're tired, frustrated, etc., is very different to knowing that they're crying because they genuinely need something.
We had so when it was the Jubilee. Was it last year, the Jubilee? There was a celebration, wasn't there, for the Queen? And there's an old lady where we live that said to me, because I said that our daughter wasn't sleeping through. She was 8 months at the time. She said, ours was sleeping through at 8 days. Thinking, good for you. You're also probably like dipping their dummy in whiskey, and I'm not.
Yeah.
Isn't that the worst though? When like,
I know.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what? I just don't believe it either. I don't believe it. I think some people's perception in their minds of their child sleeping through, I think it's to do with perception. If you are happy with the amount of sleep you're getting, great, but that doesn't mean they're sleeping through.
Yeah.
The official definition is something like 5 hours, which isn't, to me, doesn't mean sleeping through. So
I wouldn't be happy with that.
No.
I know.
So moving on to sleeping through. So we've talked about getting them to sleep. And we've had a question from Emily on Instagram that said, my little one wakes up at 5:30 for a milk, and then we'll go back down to sleep after. How can I help them to stop waking for that milk?
Oh, okay. Do we know how old this one is? So at 40 months.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see a reason why a little one would need milk at night. So unless there is some sort of a medical reason, or they're underweight and they're needing to feed more often, because that can sometimes happen. I imagine it's a habit at that sort of time in the morning. So how can we stop that? You can do one of several things. You can go to cold turkey and just refuse it, knowing that there is no real need for the milk at that time. You could offer water instead. You can expect tantrums, expect water to be thrown at you because they want milk instead. And you can just ride it out and try and soothe in other ways. For example, giving a cuddle, doing some patting and stroking, as we've talked about, or leaving them for a few minutes, going back and checking on them. You could do it where you gradually reduce the amount that you're giving, because they can't really tell at that sort of age if you give them 8 ounces versus 7, and then gradually cut it down until you get to a smaller amount. Then you can be quite sure that they're not hungry, their body's got used to not having so much milk or volume at that sort of time, and then you can go cold turkey and get rid again. The The other thing you can do, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it for this age child, but it's something that you could try, or anybody else with another age, with a younger one could try, is a dream feed. Have you two heard of dream feeds before?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So a dream feed, you would usually think of a dream feed as you would give it to them to fill them up and hopefully they would sleep longer. Theoretically, that should work. But the way that I use them in sleep training is that you would set your alarm, and this is the bit that you're not going to like, but set your alarm for maybe half an hour before they would actually wake, feed them in their sleep so you can be sure that they are not hungry, and then you can respond to them with utter confidence when they do then wake up at 5:30 out of habit, that they're not hungry. Because I think that that's the worry for some people, isn't it? That, oh, what if they are genuinely hungry? Or what if they are genuinely thirsty? So you kind of beat them at their own game, give them that feed, give them that milk or water or whatever it might be. So then when they do wake, you can respond to them in a different way, soothe them back to sleep in a different way, knowing with utter confidence that they're not genuinely hungry. So, yeah, so you'd either go cold turkey, cut it down gradually, or do a dream feed so that you know that you can respond to them with utter confidence when they do wake up. And then you would gradually cut that dream feed down and then cut it out when you know that they genuinely didn't need it, and then they can then sleep till longer in the mornings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, we did the cutting it down with our first.
Did you?
That worked really well. It took about a week. And then a week later, he got poorly and it all changed again. So
I know, it does, doesn't it? I think the thing is, once you know that they can sleep well most of the time, you can, obviously, of course, you can forgive if they're ill anyway, but you know that you can get back on track, and you've got the confidence to get things back on track because you know they can do it. Whereas when they're a bit up and down anyway, illness just throws things off even more, and it just becomes really untangled, doesn't it? And you don't know how to then get back to where you were. Yeah. With those early morning wakings, just going back onto that one, actually, quite often early wakes are caused by overtiredness from the previous day. So I'd be interested to know what this little one's naps look like and what sort of time they were going to bed as well. And that's due to the release of a hormone called cortisol, which stays in our system. It's a stimulant, and it stays in our system. And therefore, as you get into towards the morning, it's still in your system, and it prevents you from staying in a deep sleep, and it causes early morning wakings. Yeah. So have a look at the naps. So it's kind of all intermingled, sleep is.
And is that a case of dropping the nap or moving the nap or changing the duration of it?
Yeah. So at 14 months, and this is quite common at this sort of age as well, because that's the kind of cusp when they might be dropping down from 2 naps to 1 nap. And they want to drop down to 1 nap, but they can't quite do it, so they're shattered. And sometimes they might need a little bit of a top-up nap in the morning just to get them through to that lunchtime, middle of the day sort of nap. And then what happens is they're overtired, and it's then affecting the next morning, which, because they've woken up early, you're tempted to then bring the nap earlier the next day, and it just becomes that vicious circle of overtiredness. More often than not, children who don't sleep well need more sleep in the day rather than the other way around. And it's mad, isn't it? You'd think that it would be the other way around. If the more tired we are as adults, the better we'll sleep at night. But for children, it's the opposite. Unless they're sleeping something ridiculous like 6 or 7 hours in the day. But there is obviously a balance over the 24-hour period. But generally, there's an old saying, isn't there? Sleep breeds sleep. The better the quality of sleep in the day, the better the night will be as well.
Oh, that's interesting, because so my daughter's dropped her lunchtime nap as well.
Does she not nap at all now?
No, and she just flat out refused. And so we tried everything, and even when we were doing kind of sleep training for that nap time, she just fought it for the entire time. So now she dropped it, but her nighttime sleep improved on the first night because she was shattered. And then now it's just gone back to normal of waking up kind of 3 or 4 times. And like we did everything at the front end of like, the routine is the exact same. It's standardized. Everything's in place. It's calm. We even use the same music. Shout out to Spotify, because we're like the top listeners to a certain song. And even like, making sure she's got a drink and she's fed and all of those things. She goes down well now, but she'll still wake up kind of in the middle of the night. And it seems to be, at the moment, it seems to be different things. Sometimes it could be a nightmare. Sometimes she'll just wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'll just wake up and she'll be in your face. But it's just now that thing of trial and error, going through everything of like, what is causing this? I'm really too tired.
Do you know what though? And that's the thing, isn't it? There's this, you can Google checklists of what to do if your child's waking in the night, and it's, are you hungry? Are you this? Are you that? Are you that? Or the other? And once you've exhausted that, it's like, where do you go from there? And honestly, there are things that I just see time and time again, the same things over and over again. So the first of them is an imbalance of daytime sleep. So if you don't get that quite right, so if they're just serial cat nappers, for example, they're not getting the benefit of all the different stages of sleep. So that's going to affect them. If they're not getting, usually if they're overtired, occasionally if they're having too much sleep and they're undertired, but not usually so much. So there's the first one. The second one is that they don't know how to fall asleep on their own, because they're either fed to sleep or rocked to sleep or somebody's sitting with you to fall asleep. So then what happens is when you wake up in the night, you're realizing, oh, okay, I'm not still feeding, or I'm not, mum's not with me or whatever. Similar, I guess, to if we went to sleep in our bed and you wake up when you're on the kitchen floor, you're going to wake up and think, oh God, where am I? And then if they've then needed help to get to sleep in the first place, they're going to seek that help to get back to sleep again. And again, that just becomes a vicious cycle where it's help to sleep, they wake, help to sleep, they wake, all through the night. And then the third one, which it sounds like it might be potentially with Noah, is just habit. She's just in the habit of waking up and needing something. She probably doesn't even know what that something is, which is why she's coming to find you. She's needing a drink, she's needing this, that, and the other. And she's potentially feeding off some sort of an interaction. And even if you think it's not an interaction, to her it is. So actually getting that kind of zombie consistency every single time is potentially what you could be looking at.
So how would you transition out of that?
Good question. How does she fall asleep?
So at the moment, again, so she was in and out of hospital kind of up until recently.
Okay.
And so every time we had a routine, it would change.
Yeah.
And so then the last thing was she started having quite bad like night terrors and like nightmares. And so the routine that we've landed on now is after all bedtime and all that, my wife will be in the room, like sat on a chair, but while she and then she'll leave once she's asleep. So that's she's edging closer to the door every
Brilliant.
time.
Oh,
That's the current trajectory.
So what I would do from then on is every time she wakes up in the night, go and sit on that chair and sit there silently until she falls back to sleep.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah, I would keep and just repeat. So until you want to almost like retrain her brain into knowing that she doesn't have to wake to find out what's going to happen, because it's the same every time and it's that boring. It's not even worth waking for. And it can take a while, but repeat.
You will be sat silently as well, won't you? Because you'll be fast off.
Like falling asleep with your head in your hands.
She's also like, only in the last 2 weeks, she now refuses to have me do it. So,
oh no.
What a shame for you.
I'm sitting there going, oh, it's such a shame, but
what was on the telly?
Well, can I ask a question? If we're doing our own
let's go.
Why not? Let's do it.
Solve our problems with Daisy. So,
new podcast idea.
Our little boy he's 3.5.
Yeah.
And he's always been really good with his routine. He goes to bed really well most nights. Tonight was an exception. He does a bit of coming out of his bedroom, but really, after 2 or 3 times, he's going to go to sleep and he'll be fine.
Yeah.
One thing that he does, though, he wakes up at about 5:20 or 5:40 most days.
Yeah.
And he is awake. There is no going back to sleep. So we've tried, and I bet you hear people say this to you all the time. We've tried everything in terms of we've shortened his nap. We've moved it earlier in the day. After bedtime, we've taken him downstairs for food because we're thinking, is it food related? Everything.
Nothing works.
Now we're at the point, and it doesn't matter if he goes to bed at 7 or 9. Do you know when like late people go, oh, they'll sleep tomorrow? We're like, he won't.
They don't. They get up earlier.
Yeah, so we're kind of just like, what is going to get him to get past that little light sleep at 5:30,
Okay.
through to 7?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so what time is he going to bed currently?
About 7
Okay.
o'clock.
So 7 a.m. might be slightly unrealistic. Most children of that sort of age need about 11 hours overnight, between 10 and 12, but go for 11, and then anything else is a bonus, isn't it? So would maybe lower your expectations slightly and go for maybe a 6, half 6, first of all. Sorry, I'm about to say that, but
6, half 6.
unless you start putting him to bed a little bit later. But it's not just to put him to bed half an hour later, he'll wake up half an hour later. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It takes quite a while to solve the early mornings. So he said about a nap as well in his 3.5. Do you think he needs a nap at 3.5?
He's dropping it. So we're at the phase at the minute where he's dropping his nap, but come the afternoon, he's very grouchy, very, very grizzly.
Yeah.
And if we were to drive somewhere at 4 o'clock, you're in danger nap territory.
Yeah, of course you are.
A little bit in between.
And actually, and if he's waking up early, he's going to be more tired, and then therefore need the tap again. It just comes into this cycle again, doesn't it? So I would potentially stop the nap, because it could be then that he's having too much sleep over a 24-hour period. But what do you do when he wakes up at, let's say, 5:30? That would be my next question.
What does my wife do when he wakes up at 5:30? So that's a good question. So he will either come into our bed and just talk.
Yeah.
Or we'll take him back to his bed.
Yeah.
He will just talk. So our thing at the minute is just put him in his room and hope he goes back to sleep.
Yeah.
Or he'll play or do whatever. Really, we're at that point where it's just, as long as he's not disturbing us and he's not downstairs, we're okay.
Yeah, I think so. And that's really the best thing that you can do. If he comes into your bed, you're at risk of him wanting to do that then every morning, and it could potentially get earlier and earlier because he doesn't know what time it is. He just thinks I'm awake. Go try and get in mummy and daddy's bed. And then but leaving him in his room just to see what happens. Hopefully he will go back to sleep. If he doesn't, at least he's still resting. Is the other option. And I would just keep putting him back in his room and just saying, still sleep time now, go back to sleep. And it's that tricky sort of age that if he does decide he's going to get up and play, nothing's going to stop him. But like you say, as long as he's not bothering you. The other thing that works quite well for his age is, have you got a grow clock or similar sleep trainer clock? Why? What's the story about grow clocks?
This is a soul.
Okay, go on then.
It just does not work.
It does work. You just don't implement it properly.
Sat me down. So we've had the grow clock for a long time.
Yeah.
And he loves numbers.
Yeah.
He loves numbers. So having the clock in there, he loves looking at them, and he'll tell us. And that's a lot of the time we know what time it is, because we'll say, what colour's your clock? Blue. What are the numbers say? And you'll say 521. And you're thinking, brilliant. Yeah. So it's like, right, wait till your clock's yellow. And all that. And so it hasn't worked for us, but please tell me how we can do better.
Okay, so first of all, I wouldn't even ask him what colour's your clock. If it's not on yellow, in which case he'll tell you my clock's yellow, I'd just take him back, because you'll know that, unless he comes in saying, it's on, my clock's on yellow. But if the clock's not yellow, he goes back to sleep. But what I would then do, you have to be really strict with it as well. So if the clock's not yellow, he doesn't get up. But you have to be super, super strict with it. That clock is like the law. Because if you don't enforce it, he'll think that it doesn't matter, and he can just do what he wants, because if you're not following it, then he doesn't have to follow it. So this is a good trick as well for you. I don't know how you actually do it. Look in your instructions, but there's a way that you can force the clock on. So if you get to the point where you're like, I can't keep putting you back in your bed any longer, just kind of go to the clock, force it on, and then, the sun shines up, even though it's not actually. So that's a good way that you can actually keep to it without actually keeping to it. But it's really important that you follow it. And then the other thing would be some sort of reward when he does manage to do it. But is that another thing as well? Reward chart.
That's another thing that didn't work.
I mean, if you were saying to me he doesn't go down nicely, he doesn't sleep all night, he doesn't stay in bed in the morning, I'd be saying do like much smaller rewards. Like all he has to do is go to bed nicely to get a reward the next day. And then you build it up like you kind of, it's called habit stacking. So you reward for a really small thing and then you add like another tiny thing on until he can do that. Then you add another thing on. But if it is just the early mornings, I'd just be doing some, I mean, what does he enjoy? What does he like doing in the mornings, especially?
Waking up his sister. He likes playing. He just likes playing with his toys, and he likes the toys in his bedroom and counting and all that.
Okay, I was just thinking if there's something like, for example, if our daughter, if she gets up, which she does sometimes before her clock comes on, she isn't allowed to watch the iPad, and that is like, oh my gosh, devastating for her. So that's how we have done it for her. So it's not even necessarily a reward; it's the withdrawal of something that she likes, only for that day. But she knows that if she doesn't do it, she doesn't get the iPad. And like I say, she will try really, really hard not to come out, unless obviously she needs something. But even that's pushing it sometimes with what she says she needs. So it's being a bit clever about it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a reward like a sticker on a chart, something that's going to motivate him. And what motivates her is having the iPad. So if there's something in particular that would really motivate him, like something that he could do or have, you could use that as a reward for him.
Yeah.
Thinking about outside the box. Because I guess if like somebody said to me, will you run the marathon and I'll give you a chocolate bar, I'd be like, I'm not interested at all. Whereas if they said, okay, there's £1 million at the end of it, that's more of a reward for you to actually do something that's quite hard, isn't it?
I think that's that's the most difficult thing, because the right thing to do actually costs us more in the short term. It's actually, which is why it's so difficult, because actually if I just give the iPad, I'm going to get an extra 20 minutes. And that's,
I know.
It feels like £1 million.
Yep.
Yeah. We tried
in that moment.
We did it with big prizes as well. We said you can get a bullseye from Toy Story if you do it 3 days in a row, and it didn't happen. Yeah. It's funny that you say about the forcing it yellow button, because he knows how to do it. So there were a couple of days where you go, my clock's yellow. We'll go look at the time, and it was before the time we'd set. And we would say,
no.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, you can't do that.
Okay, yeah, the work clock does not work for you. Okay, I'll concede defeat on that one. If he knows how to do it, but put it somewhere high up where he can't reach it, on top of the wardrobe.
That's a good idea. We'll put it out of reach. Not tried that one. Yeah. There's always something you've not tried.
Yeah, always. Yeah. No, I think a lot of it though is the. Sorry.
So let's move on from my personal woes and get back to questions from the listeners.
So we've got a question from.
Oh gosh. Oh, just dropped me. There we go. Start again. Sorry.
Right, let me just.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay.
Oh, thank you for that, Daisy. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely fine. But no, I think it's the way. Quite often, it's the way that you respond to them and what you give them that is fueling that wake.
You're 100% right. We do need to be stricter with enforcing it, but it's at that point where I'm so tired that it's like just go, chill.
Yeah.
He'll get his Alexa to turn his light on, and
the worst.
They're so clever, aren't they? They're so clever.
So we've had a question from Ellie, and she said, any tips on how to settle my toddler back to sleep in the middle of the night would be amazing. For a bit of background information, Jude has autism and he's always really struggled with sleep. He struggles to wind down once he is asleep, and he wakes up throughout the night. He recently has been prescribed medication by the pediatrician, which has helped him going off to sleep, but is still waking up multiple times. It can take it around an hour to settle him, and we are currently getting around 3 to 4 hours a night.
Oh gosh, yeah, I feel for you with that one. So I don't have a huge amount of experience working with children with autism. Obviously, I do know that some children can have sleep difficulties, and medications such as melatonin can be really helpful. So if it was a child who didn't have autism, the advice would be to not respond to them, to be ultra boring. And this is something that you can absolutely try with him. It's just that with him having autism, And some other things as well, like children with epilepsy, they sometimes struggle with their sleep, and it's to do with a lack of the sleep hormone melatonin. So what I would suggest, if you've tried the melatonin, there are sleep consultants out there who do specialise in working with children with autism and ADHD and epilepsy. So it could be that you seek somebody like that for advice. I wouldn't want to say, oh, try X, Y, and Z when it's not something that I've got experience in. So I'm sorry I can't be super helpful on that one, but there are definitely people out there who do have experience and have additional training that could be able to help you.
That's a great answer. I think most people would appreciate that you've not tried to just have a stab in the dark.
No, absolutely. No. And it's really tricky with any child without knowing all of the information anyway. And it's so difficult when it's kind of not even knowing necessarily the age of the child. But yeah, something like that, I wouldn't want to just try and fob you off with an answer that I'm not really sure what I'm saying on. Yeah.
What we'll do, Ellie, is we'll get Daisy to send us a name of someone that she can recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. We'll do.
So moving on to nap time, and we talked about naps a little bit, and you mentioned around that kind of 14, 15 month age, maybe they want to start dropping one. How much of a role, and you mentioned about overtiredness, and this is something that confuses me a little bit.
Yeah.
More sleep in the day can cause them to be overtired at the night. How much do naps feed into that nighttime? Because I know they do.
Yeah.
But how would you recommend going about that when children are starting to go from 2 to 1 or go from 1 to 0?
Yeah. So I guess answering your question as a whole, naps are actually really important. Some children, it doesn't seem to affect them. And if they sleep well at night and they're not napping much in the day, or they're just cat napping here and there, as long as they're sleeping at night and you're happy with it, absolutely great. You don't need to do anything at all. Like I was saying to you earlier, if you're happy with having no in your bed, great, no need to change anything. It's just when it's affecting other things that you might want to think about trying something different. So as a bit of a guide, when your child is, let's say, so when they're newborn up to 3 months, 4 months-ish, they pretty much sleep any time, anywhere, anyhow they want to. You can't really force them into any sort of a routine. They might get themselves into a routine by themselves, but it is difficult to force a routine at that sort of age, even if that's what you wanted to do. 4, 5, 6 months, I'd expect them to be having 3 or 4 naps a day. By the time they get to 5, 6, 7 months, potentially 3 naps a day. And then between 6 and 8 months, they'd probably drop to 2 naps. 14 to 17 months, they drop to 1 nap. And then anywhere from, well, who knows, with toddlers, they get such FOMO, don't they, that they don't want to nap from about age 2. But anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 is when I would expect them to drop their nap completely. So just as an overview of the average sleep needs for a child, the better your child sleeps in the day usually means that they will sleep better at night, because I mentioned this earlier, but when they don't sleep well and they get overtired, and you've probably seen this yourself, if they've not napped well in the day, they get this second wind at tea time and they're absolutely running around like crazy. And so there's this hormone called cortisol that's released, and it's like a shot of adrenaline essentially to power them through. But because it's a hormone and hormones are quite long lasting, it then stays in the bloodstream, which helps stops you from falling asleep so easily, stops you from sleeping so deeply at nighttime, and then causes that early morning waking. So that's the issue when your child doesn't sleep as much as they need to during the day. As they're dropping their naps, so from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 0, their bodies aren't necessarily mature enough to do that yet. So they need to, but they can't quite do it yet. So at that point is when you might consider doing a little bit of a top-up nap. So when they do drop down to 1 nap, you might find that they need that nap at lunchtime because it's in the middle of the day, so they've got similar amount of time awake both sides of the nap, but they might need 10, 15 minutes in the morning just to get them through to that lunchtime nap. Probably wouldn't advise it the other side, because that's when you're in that danger nap territory, aren't you, of a tea time nap that then is going to keep them awake for a long time. So you can do things like that. You can give them that little bit of a top up. or you can bring bedtime a bit earlier. So if they're struggling to get through that stretch between the last nap of the day and bedtime, bring it earlier. It's not going to mean that they wake up earlier in the morning. It doesn't usually work like that, unless you bring it earlier by 2 hours. Of course, that's going to affect it. But another half an hour earlier isn't going to make much of a difference. So, yeah, in answer to your question, that was a long answer for what could be just a short answer. The answer is yes, naps are important.
And have you got any advice for naps? Because I've heard different things, like if they're napping in the day, keep the curtains open so they know what's day and night. I've heard close the curtains so they're used to it being dark when they're in bed. What's the advice?
So when they're a newborn, yes, the advice is to keep the curtains open and keep them where it's loud, because they need to get used to day and night. Because when they're in the womb, they've got no concept of day and night, and it takes a little while for them to get what's called their circadian rhythm, so their day and night essentially, in sync, because they just have no concept of it. So until they know day and night, they're starting to sleep for slightly longer stretches at night time. Definitely curtains open, loud noise, so they get used to the daytime. But as they get older, it'll help them to have nap in a dark room where it's quieter, or although you might like to use some sort of white noise, pink noise, etc., just to muffle any background sounds that might cause them to wake sooner than you want them to. And in the cot is where they're going to get the best sleep, or in their bed if they're older, their deepest sleep. But there is absolutely a time and a place for a car nap, a pushchair nap, a carrier nap. For me, you need to be flexible. So my son was born in lockdown, and he will really only sleep well in his cot because he just hasn't been used to sleeping, especially for the first 6+ months of his life. He wasn't used to sleeping out and about. And now that means that if we go out for the day, and not just now that he's 2, but he's never been able to go out for the day and sleep in the pushchair because he's just not been used to it.
Wow.
So, there's so many. If you Google it, you can find a rule for anything, can't you, with children's sleep? But if you can get them to sleep in fairly quiet conditions, fairly dark, in their own sleep space, that's where they're going to get the deepest, most good quality sleep. But that's not always possible, especially if you've got more than one child and you need to be out and about. I think just getting some sleep into them is more important than it's not the be all and end all that they have to sleep at home.
That's fantastic.
Really,
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. I'm hoping that the sleep wizardry works. I have one more question before we let you go. So as I've mentioned, my toddler has dropped her lunchtime nap.
Yeah.
As many parents will know, that is the only time that's necessary. Is there any trickery that I can do that will get her to sleep again in the daytime?
No, and I wish there was, because I don't want my son to drop his nap either. No, he still sleeps for 2 hours now. He's 2.5, and I am dreading the day when that has to be cut shorter, or he decides he's going to drop it. Oh my gosh. A film. Put a film on. It's quiet time now. Do you know what, actually? There's somebody that I follow on Instagram, and it's not going to be that helpful because I can't remember her name. It might be 5 Minute Mum. It might not be. If I can find who it is, I'll tell you. She's got some amazing ideas. If you want to sit and have 5 minutes to finish your coffee in peace, of things that you can do, that like problem solving things for them of different ages as well, that you can set them up with, so you can just go and sit and have a coffee.
That's good.
Wow.
So if I find who that is, I'll tell you. I don't think my son's quite old enough for that yet, but there's some really good ideas on there that I'm banking for later. Yeah, but if you find the answer to that, please tell me as well.
Daisy, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people like ourselves that find that really useful, and there's loads of things.
Good answer.
We're going to go and try. If someone needs a bit of a sleep professor in their life, like yourself, how can people?
Another good one, yeah.
How can people get hold of you? Have you got any resources that are available on your website that people can use?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, I'm Lavender Blue Sleep Consulting. And then you can find some links from there. Or my website is lavenderbluesleepconsulting.com. And I've got 2 free downloads, depending on the age of your child. So there's one that's teaching your child to self-settle. And there's some examples in there, but they're quite generic ideas that you can then adapt to the age and stage your child is at. So it's not just for little babies. You can try it with your children as well. So if currently, let's say they're feeding to sleep, give you ideas of how to kind of put steps in place so you can get them to the point where you put them down in their cot awake. And it can happen. It might seem a million miles away to some people, but you can absolutely do it. And then there's another one as well for people with children 3 years plus, which is mindfulness activities for a calmer and stress-free bedtime. So they're free downloads that you can get on my website. And then if somebody wants to have an informal chat about they're thinking of getting some help, I'm always happy. There's a booking form on the website as well. You can book in to have a free chat with me, and I can talk you through whether I think I can help, first of all, and then what that support might look like too. So Instagram, the website, and also a chat as well.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much, Daisy.
Thank you.
So massive thank you to Daisy. I really enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Ironically, I was tired before we started.
Do you feel well rested now?
And now I'm awake. I kind of want to go wake up my little boy.
Just to try out some new methods.
Yeah, to lay out the rules for the grow clock.
I really hope that was helpful to you. It's definitely helpful for me. If this helps you at all, or you've got any more questions, send them our way.
And be sure to follow Daisy on Instagram, or check out our website and send her an email.
Yeah. If you want to get in touch with us, you can send us a message on Instagram or TikTok at Parenting Tools Pod.
And if you want to send us an email, we're at parentingtoolspod@gmail.com with no jingle.
No jingle.